when we did our documentary, Women of Ground Zero, which told the story of female rescue workers right after 9/11, people would give us a lot of pushback. They would say, why are you making the women more heroic than the men? Why would you be so divisive? I said, well, if you actually examine all of the news stories that were done on the rescue workers in 9/11 and tell me how many women appeared in any of those stories, you'd actually discover almost never. If you were to look at any fresco, any photo, any painting that had been done, you would realize that the women had actually kind of been written out of the history of 9/11, even though the rescue efforts, even though they were actually involved at every single level. So it's not about making certainly the women more heroic. It's about making sure their story is told too, in the fabric of a story that's being told about a critical time in our nation's history. A man stood up at one of the events we did, we were doing a screening, and he said, I think that this is a waste of time to single out women. And one of the women panelists said, do you know how many stories on the German shepherds of 9/11 CNN has done? Several, actually. No one minds. But when you want to talk about the women of 9/11, it irks some people. Eventually, to me, those tough conversations are worth having. Because I believe that when your story is not told, you leave it to others to define you, to make guesses about who you are and what you believe and what you stand for and what matters to you. When your story isn't told, you can't monitor and track change, which is slow in coming, but eventually comes. By 1967, my parents would have their sixth child, my little brother. And the Supreme Court would overturn the ban on interracial marriage. And my parents' marriage would now be legal in the state where they lived. My mother used to say, if you wait for everybody to get with you, you could be waiting a long time. They had their sixth child, they had built their family, and they had moved on to create their life. And in doing so, they became role models for other people. Telling your own story and embracing what you bring while you are open to what others bring, I think is critical. For my siblings and I, we took lessons from that. I remember having an interview in Springfield, Massachusetts, and the news director there said to me, after what I thought was a stellar interview, by the way, he said, listen, I'm only interested in hiring a spot for one black person, and you're not dark-skinned enough to read as my black person that I've hired, so I can't give you this job. And I remember being, well, now, of course, I think lawsuit, but then I was just stunned. And I called my mother, and she said, Lovey, calls me Lovey, Lovey, you don't want to go there. Anybody has an idea of who you are and what you can bring, you don't want to work for them anyway. Or a couple of days later, I had an interview in Connecticut, and the news director there said to me, Soledad, that's an interesting name. In that way, when someone says that they don't mean interesting at all, they mean just weird. My full name is Maria de la Soledad Teresa Marchetti O'Brien, which loosely translated is the Virgin Mary. And so he said, would you be willing to change your name? I'm like, I'm named after the Virgin Mary. I'm going to get struck dead by lightning on the way home if I change my name. And my parents will disown me, so no. And I called my mother crying, and she said, Lovey, they want to put you in this box that makes them comfortable, as they do with everyone. You don't have to go there. Go find a place where you can bring your talents and your diversity and all those things that you bring to make a place better. And she was right. Even recently, I was working at CNN in 2004 into 2005 when the Asian tsunami happened. And I had just had my twin boys, so I had 4 children under 4. And I got a call from our assignment desk saying, listen, I got to call you and ask you if you want to go to Thailand because, you know, the tsunami, but I'm sure you don't want to go because moms don't want to go, but told me I had to call you. I was like, I have 4 children under 4. Put me on a plane to Thailand. That sounds amazing. Are you kidding me? Can I go for at least a month? That seems reasonable. But you constantly have to defend yourself. And it's not just about gender, it's not just about race, and it's not just about ethnicity. It's about whatever you believe and whatever your story is. If you're not telling it, somebody else is making assumptions about who you are and what you bring and what you can do.